So today we're going to get into building a graphic using the tools and techniques of previous assignments. To start out with, we're going to go to Adobe Illustrator and build out a document with 12 inches wide by 10 inches tall. You can rename the document, but we just want to prepare to have this save every 5-10 minutes just to be safe. You always want to make sure that it doesn't crash on you. So I'm going to click Create. And with our document size, we're going to get first into thinking about the color scheme that we want to use. For our color scheme today, I've already pre-assembled out some colors that we can choose from. You have the hex numbers down at the bottom that you can follow along, or we can get into creating out a color palette over on the right side navigation. I'm first going to look to create out a couple text box or a couple boxes that are going to help sample each of the colors. It will take a minute to get these examples, but first going to look to copy these over. You do one at a time for each box, and then I can always hit Command D to replicate and create out multiples of these boxes. So once I have one, I can then use the eyedropper tool to click and sample each color that I have. Just click on the box you want, use the eyedropper tool, and sample as you like. The shortcut key for the eyedropper is I on your keyboard. So if I want to switch over to an object, I can simply hit I, it jumps over to the eyedropper, and so I can just click on the object that I want. But it's just a matter of then selecting out the box that you're looking for. Again, go back to I, and you can sample each color as you go. So this gives us plenty of colors to work with, and it's going to be about experimentation, seeing what colors are going to look best for your design. Once I have all the colors, I can select all of them, and then I'm going to click on the folder icon over on the swatches panel. I can name the folder specifically, but for all the boxes I have, it automatically makes a selection and grouping of all the different colors. So it's going to be a lot easier to now sort through, and I can eliminate out this picture I no longer need, but I have the color scheme if necessary above. So looking at our sample, I'm going to look to build out a graphic that can show dimension, show some interest, and I'm going to use the rectangle tool to start out. With the rectangle tool, I'm going to look to draw out some narrow vertical lines. I can make a copy, hold down Alt or Option, click and drag to the side, and then again I can hit Command D to replicate and create out 5 lines that are going to represent our design. For the colors, I'm going to look to probably do more of a rainbow effect. So again, I can select on the object I want, choose a color. If you ever want to modify or just change it again, just pick out the color that you're looking for. I don't have to go to the eyedropper tool, but now I can go over to the samples that I have here. We see that we're creating now a transition of these 5 colors. Once I have these 5 colors, I'm going to look to make a copy. I'm going to hit Command C, Command F. I'm going to take out the bottom or to grab the top, pull it down to the bottom, but I'm going to click over on the Free Distort tool or Free Transform tool and use the Free Distort below in the submenu. If I hold down Option on my keyboard, you see that I can get into manipulating out the shape. Or if I hold Shift, I can make sure that it maintains a perfect angle. But if I hold Alt and Shift together, or if I go with Option if you're on the Mac, I can expand these out, and I'm creating what looks like depth and dimension, making these jut out as if we're seeing them rise in front of the middle of the screen. Once I have these lines, we're going to look to now build out a graphic or a half circle shape. I go over to our ellipse tool, left side navigation. I'm going to first build out a circle, click and drag. And then I'm going to click on the bottom of the circle with the direct selection tool so I can cut out the bottom portion of the shape. While I have this, I can go over to the pen tool and I'm going to look to enclose the shape again so it's one solid object. I'm going to scale this up, make it a little bit larger. But now that I have this shape, I'm going to look to make a copy. Command C, Command F, or I get into scaling this down, reducing the size. And if I change out the color, we can see it a little bit better. But if I want to select these options, I can use the Align tool to make sure that everything is perfectly aligned. The problem with this is that you're not necessarily getting that perfect alignment on the top portion. I could look to scale it to try matching it, but it's tricky because you don't know exactly where the center of the object is. Rather than doing that, what I can do is select on the actual shape. I'm going to go up to Object, Path, and Offset Path. With Offset Path, rather than doing a positive offset, I'm going to do a negative offset. So I can add a minus symbol to the front, and I'm going to change this to negative 0.5 inches. If I check and recheck preview, you can see that it does go inward now, but it's just not enough. So I'm going to drop this down again. I'm going to try negative 1.5. And again, just check preview, recheck preview, see if it works. If it's a little bit too much, just adjust the number till you are satisfied with the shape. So I just want a little bit more, so I'll go about 1.1. That works for me. So this is negative 1.1 inches. I can click OK. And then with this, what I'm going to actually do is look to cut this out using the shape builder. I can hold down Alt or Option to eliminate out the interior of that line. We can always get into modifying the colors later on. I have no idea if these colors are going to work for me or if I want to change these later on, but it's all about experimentation, seeing what works. Now that we have this, we want to get our main feature, and that's the word graphics. I'm going to go over to my type tool, click and drag to create out a text box, and type in the word graphics. With graphics, we're going to be using what is known as scripto font. Scripto font has a nice retro 70s feel within the text. And I'm going to look to scale this up. We just want to have a fun, playful design that can grab some interest, create some personality. I want to go a little bit bigger overall. I can always use the scale tool as well, left side navigation. Click and drag on the shape. Just make sure you hold shift and carefully drag it out. If you're holding shift, it can still stretch out sideways, stretch out vertically, but we will make sure that we're going on an angle so it is really stretching out to the outside of the image. So now that I have this, I'm going to look to play with a little bit of arrangement and get into rotating it. Understand that if you do have a text box that you're trying to rotate, you can't simply just go to the corner. It's not going to rotate the text correctly. Instead, what we have to do is make sure that either we turn the text to outlines or we go over to left side navigation and click on the rotate tool. The rotate tool, I can get into rotating it how I want, but just understand that it may not be perfect or may not necessarily be what you're looking for. but this will give us the ability to modify the text and fit the text as needed. But the text is a little bit flat overall, so we're going to think about how to create dimension. And to create dimension, what we're going to look to do is create a copy of this text, Command or Control C, Command V. So we have a second version of this text. And this will help create the sense of depth with the text, that we can create what is known as create a blend between the two variations of the text. And we're looking at it with two different colors, just so we can see it. You can see how one sits on top of the other. Change that another, just so we can see it. But there is no real blend between the back variation and the front variation. So what we're going to look to do is select out both of them. To select out both, we first want to get into creating outlines. So I'm going to go to Type at my tab by navigation, click on Create Outlines. And now with the back variation, I'm going to hold down Shift, click on the front one. And we're going to create a blend between these two. I'm going to go over to the Blend tool, left side navigation. Click on the top variation and then on the background variation. If I click off of it, it creates a gradient between the two. You may not necessarily want to be going for that type of look, and it also comes out a little bit muddy when I'm looking at the top variation. We will look into adding in more depth with the top variation, but for these two, we are going to put these back to the same color. But while we're in isolation mode, if we want to go into isolation mode, you just double click on the blended element. Then I can click on the top one or the back one. The back one, I'm going to scale down the text a little bit just so we can create some more interest. The top one is a little bit larger. It's meant to be that way. Again, we can always scale this down a little bit to show more depth with the text. But I'm going to select on the top variation, hit Command or Control C, and then get out of isolation mode. With this copy I've made, I'm going to hit Control F or Command F. It pastes another variation in front, but I'm going to change the color out. So if I were to do a white, we can see that now we have the front text popping out. But the text isn't really sitting how I want. There's no blend between the two options, or looking at the background, it gets lost inside the graphic. If I want to modify this, I'm going to select on this top variation of text. Over on my Pathfinder tool, I can go up to Window, Pathfinder, if you don't see it over on the Properties panel on the right side navigation. I'm going to first make sure to click Unite, just so that I am combining each of the individual letters with no gap. If I don't hit Unite, and I were to put a stroke on this shape, when I put the stroke on the shape, you see that there's a separation between the letters. We're not looking for this, so what I'm going to do again, we're going to go over to our Pathfinder panel. I'm going to click on Unite, the first option, and now it creates a cohesive set of text. We can always modify the text later on, but we can now at least see what it looks like having graphics pop out on the screen. If we want to get into changing colors, maybe go back to my color scheme. I can consider what I want to do for a stroke. I can use my swatches that I've already used. Understanding your stroke, you have to think about how the stroke is going to be placed. If I go over to my stroke panel, I want to think about, do I want the alignment on the inside of the text? Do I want the alignment on the outside of the text? So it gives us more white area. But you also have to think about that for your blended background behind the objects, because it is a little bit wider if you go with the outside stroke. So that means you may have to put a stroke on your background as well. If you want to change the colors or test out different variations of colors, you can see how it looks. Because of in isolation mode, you can see if, say, this red color is going to sit well. Obviously, the blue stroke doesn't go with it, but maybe I try out this red on the outside as well. And again, now I'm having a little bit of a conflict with the stripes in the background. So I may want to consider how I can make these a little bit more unique, or maybe add in a background color and simplify the design. So what I could think about doing is simplifying this is by making the complicated colors that I do have more of one singular color. I could consider using a rectangle tool to fill out the background color. Command or Control Shift left bracket will send all those objects to the back. And just to experiment, you can see what the background color would look like, say with a light blue or light off-tone color. Or I can consider going with a darker color so we get something that pops off the screen a little bit. What I'm going to look to do is deselect from this background and focus just on the 5 shapes, 5 lines that I've created. So if I were to do a light color, see how we can get the single color behind the objects. But again, it's all about experimentation, seeing what works, see what doesn't. So I could consider trying out other colors as well. Again, I might have to go in isolation mode and I can take a look at the swatches that I've used already. Rather than doing just a flat white color on top of the text, I could consider a gradient as well. So it's not just this standard white. So if I wanted to go over to my swatches panel, or my gradient panel, I'm going to separate this from the background and use my swatches that I can pull down into my gradient. So with my gradient for this, I'll try out a lighter off-white eggshell color. And using this, I can look to replace out the black and white. With this lighter variation, I can go over to my gradient tool, left side navigation, and redraw the gradient in the direction that I want this traveling. I was making sure to select out all the elements, making sure that the gradient travels through. I can always go with a thinner line so that the orange is only appearing on the bottom. And obviously I have to select on just the dot of the eye and redraw that gradient out slightly. So select on the individual one, and I can just have the white appearing in the inside of that. So now we get this very retro cool feel for our text. I still have this compass shape, and now we want to get into possibly adding in text. So we have to think about wrapping text around the shape. I'm going to start by going over to my ellipse tool. With my ellipse tool, I can draw out a circle shape. And I'm going to delete out the bottom half of this with the direct selection tool, clicking on the bottom anchor point. And I'm going to eliminate out the fill color because it's becoming a distraction. But I want to scale this text up so I'm getting a shape that is relatively fitting to stay aligned to the inner circle or inner half circle that I have for my design. With my type tool over on the left side navigation, I can click on the line that I've just created. Clicking on this line, I'm going to move my cursor over top. And it does place in the text that I've just previously used, but I'm going to switch this over to Lemon Milk, another font I downloaded from devont.com, and reduce the size of this text. We don't need it to be so big. And we can modify the size of the text and determine what size we need to fill out the space that we're looking to put text on. So for this, we're going to add in a title. Welcome to. And I'm going to scale up the size of the text. And I may want to consider actually opening up the leading or the kerning or spacing between the lines of the letters themselves. So I'm going to go over to my character panel. My character panel is not appearing over the side. We can click on the top portion to get our character panel, or you can go up to Window at the top navigation and down to Type, and then click on Character. But I like to use the top portion. And I'm going to go over to my tracking setting, set the tracking. I can, with the text selected, I can adjust to modify the spacing between the text. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller, but spread this out so it fills out more space. I can always click on the drop down as well to go higher with the size of the text. So I would try 200. Think about the colors. We do want it to pop, so I'm going to go to this eggshell color so it stands out a little bit better. With the placement, we see welcome to fitting to the area, and we can consider adjusting on the lines of type so that it fits better to the area. Little details that I may want to consider is possibly adding in a little bit of a shadow underneath of this text. So I'm going to make a copy, Command C or Control C, Command or Control F. I'm going to use my arrow keys to nudge this up and to the left, just one, and I'm going to pick out this darker blue color, and I'm going to pick out a sample of this to give me a shadow effect that can sit over top. Right now we can see it appearing over top of our eggshell text, but I'm going to hit Command left bracket to send this backwards, and we can see it adjusted behind the object, or behind the white text. If I wanted to add a stroke to this, I can make it stand out a little bit better. But again, if I were to just adjust the stroke, you can see how it sits behind the text, giving a little depth off the page. Next, we're going to look to use the same text and size to add in our bottom word over on the right side. Use this bar as a billboard or message. So over on the left side navigation, I'm going to go over to the type tool, click and drag, create out a text box. Shows us a sample. And we're going to use tutorial for today. We can always push up the size, but we are just looking to match out the sample that we see here. I'm going to make a copy again, Command or Control C, Command F. I'm going to look to match out the darker variation that we had behind the welcome to as well. So with this copy, I can go over to my eyedropper tool and just take your time to make sure that we get accurately. To pick up that shadow, and then I can hit Command left bracket to set it backwards. We can see that it is sitting underneath of it, but I can use the arrow keys to nudge this and slide up and to the left as if it were creating a shadow from a light source. Now we want to consider the background a little bit to make this a little bit more interesting. First, I'm going to look to actually add a drop shadow behind this compass shape. So we're going to go over to our effects, down to stylize, and I'm going to go to drop shadow. With the drop shadow, I'm going to push the opacity up a little bit so it's a little bit darker, stands off the screen. If I wanted to adjust the blur, make it a little bit wider or reduce it, just a matter of trying to find what setting will look best. But I'm going to keep it on multiply because we have these colors behind it. We do want it sitting over top of these colors. If I put it into normal setting, it comes out a little bit too gray. I'm going to click OK for right now. Again, it is a little bit of a separation that we want a little bit more shadow, so I may want to consider putting a drop shadow on this back red text as well. So effects, stylize, drop shadow. I can see that's not working how I want. So I'm going to cancel out of that, undo it. I can keep it as is, or we can take a look at another method in a second, but I do want to save my work as I continue to work on this. So another method of doing this, what we're going to do is double click and select on the back variation. We're double clicking on the back variation of the blend. I'm going to hit Command C, click out of it, and then hit Command F. Yes, it does appear in front, but I'm going to look to knock this out. And I can send this to the back, Command or Control left bracket, till it goes back to the placement that you're looking for. And I'm going to now look to put a drop shadow on just this specific object. So going up to Effect, Stylize, and Drop Shadow. So just a matter of finding the right layer, making sure it's sitting behind, and click OK. And just thinking about the commonality of this text, welcome to graphics tutorial. You may want to modify this or change the wording. So we're going to just rename this. I can zoom in, Command and Control plus, and go back over the type tool. Is your. I'm going to modify the placement so this is starting a little bit more to the left, fits better to that area. For a second, I'm just going to hit Command left bracket, send to the back, and I can rechange this out. Is your. And again, just rearrange the start of the lettering so it fits better to the design. And then I'm going to hit Command left bracket to send that backwards. So now we have this is your graphics tutorial. How it reads from top left down to the bottom through the design. Just gets the message across, creates some interest to it. But it looks good over on the foreground. We may want to consider other elements to put in the background. So we're going to take a look at either possibly putting a gradient in and also possibly putting a pattern in, just to add a little bit more interest overall. So if I were looking at a gradient, I can consider selecting on the object. With my gradient tool, I can click and drag this darker color onto the background. I'm going to grab this blue color as well and eliminate out my white color. You can look to extend it just to create out a little bit more depth so it's not so flat. If you don't necessarily like it, you can keep adjusting till you are satisfied with the color look. If the colors aren't working, feel free to modify or test out different color settings. But what I think I'm going to do is just take out a sample of this darker color and just lighten this up slightly so it's not just a flat all dark color. So our next step is looking to add in just a pattern, nothing crazy, but something to just make a little bit more interest. I can experiment with creating out my own pattern. I'm going to start with clicking on the ellipse tool. With the ellipse tool, I'm going to go over to left side navigation, and we're going to use the distort and transform, and we're going to try the pucker and bloat tool. With the pucker and bloat tool, I can pull it left or right, see how it can modify into a shape. I'm going to start out with a pucker. Once I do have it in this setting, I may want to consider expanding this shape just so I get the outline around the outside of the object. You can't undo that, but you can always just build out another shape. So I'll do the same thing with another circle. Now this time I'm going to see what happens when I do the bloat side. So pucker this time, rather than pulling it left, I'm going to pull it right. We get this interesting clover type shape. I'm going to use this as a design element. And again, I'm going to go, once I hit OK, I can go up to Object, Expand Appearance. I'm going to zoom in on this area. We're going to focus on building this out. For the shape, I can use first the alignment, making sure that it gets on the top corner of my area. Then I'm going to hold down Alt and Shift to scale this down so it fits in this top corner. I can hold down Alt, click and drag down to the bottom. Then I'm going to hold down Alt or Option, pull it over to the left. Now we're going to look to select out all 5 pieces. With these 5 pieces, I'm going to go up to Object at the top of navigation, click on Pattern and Make. It shows me a sample of what this pattern is going to look like. And zooming out, it doesn't look too bad, but it's a little bit absent. So I'm going to use this same design this puckered variation, kind of star shape. I'm going to hold down Alt or Option and click and drag this and pull it up to the top corner. And we can see now we're getting a reflective type of shape within our design. But I can also see that my shapes aren't necessarily lined up to where I want. To adjust the placement of these, we can just simply click on them. That's when I'm sitting a little bit better into the area to make sure that they are aligning. Make sure you have your smart guides on if you are trying to do alignment. You can go up to Window or View at the top of navigation, make sure smart guides is checked on. So now if we're looking at it, I don't have to repeat this to each corner because once I have it on one corner, it's repeating to every object because I have this shape expanded out. So it's a simple design, but it's something to kind of experiment with. This color may not be the best option, so I may have to adjust my color. So I am going to make it a flat color overall, so it's not just a gradient, but it is the flat gray from the lighter variation of the gradient. And once I'm done, once I'm satisfied with this pattern, I'm going to rename it. Once I have it, I can either click on the back button, exit out of the patterning editing mode, or just double click outside the area. No, we don't see anything happen, but what we're going to look to do, taking the background that we already have, I'm going to hit Command or Control C and Command or Control F to make a copy of this background, but we're going to go over to our swatches panel. And in our swatches panel, we'll see that my pattern 2024 is located at the bottom of our swatches. When I click on it, we can see it applying onto our background. If you don't like it, if you want to make modifications, think about how you can create different colors. We can go back into our pattern. I'm going to double click, and I'm just looking to reduce the size of this. I think it's a little bit too large. The good thing about the pattern is that it's going to adjust based on what you need. So with this, we're going to refit that grid. Or getting out of it, it might be too big. So I might create a second variation. I'm going to look to scale this one down. Go into my settings or into my pattern. I can make a copy of what I did. So I see the pattern that I created. I'm going to get rid of this top corner because it's going to throw off the design. But with the elements I have, I'm going to go over to my first scale this down. So I'm working with a smaller shape. And then back up to Object, Pattern, and Make. Now it's working with a lot smaller pattern. Same design. But now I can take this shape in the middle, again, make a copy so it sits on the interior. Double click outside of the option. Instead of this bigger pattern, I'm going to go to the smaller variation, and we can see how it fills out this area. Make sure you're satisfied with it. If you don't like it, you can always drop the opacity, make it more subtle. So to make this more subtle, I have it selected with the pattern. I'm just going to go over to my transparency panel and drop the opacity down. So even going down about 30%, looks a lot more a lot less defined, but still a subtle element that really helps to accentuate the rest of my design. If you want to make any modifications, I could always edit my artboard or adjust the placement of certain objects. But with these tools, you can create a lot of different things. It's just a matter of experimenting and testing out your creativity. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.